G'day, I'm Paul. So I've got a confession to make. I love V8s. They're just so silky smooth and effortless, especially in big SUVs. And this is the Jeep Grand Cherokee. This one here has the V8. It's a mid-spec model. It's called the S Limited and it's priced at just under $73,000. It competes with things like Kia Sorento, Mazda CX-9, Toyota Prado. There's a lot of competitors in that segment, but this is the only one you're going to find with a big V8 engine before you jump up to things like the Nissan Patrol. I know this car is now ancient and it's going to be replaced next year, but there's still plenty on the road and I think it's worth looking at if you're in the market for an SUV. Today we're going to do a detailed review of the Jeep Grand Cherokee. If you do want to skip ahead to other parts of this review, you can use the time codes up on the screen there, or if you're on YouTube, just scroll down and use the chapters below. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit subscribe and press the bell icon so you can find out every single time we drive a V8. Let's start with the exterior. Now, colours. You've got 4 to choose from and all but white is an additional $895. So I'm going to begin up the top here with the bonnet. So this looks a little different to a regular Jeep Grand Cherokee bonnet because the V8 version, regardless of whether it's supercharged or not, gets the SRT hood. So I kind of like the look of that. You've got these gills here and they're real. I love the black Jeep badging there as well, and this red colour looks sensational. And what about all this grille area? Well, lots of black highlights there. You can see the black down the bottom, radar for the adaptive cruise control. I still think despite its age, and this is absolutely getting on now, this is still a really good looking SUV. They've made refinements to it over the years, but I think for the most part, it still really just looks nice and aggressive out on the road. And of course you can go all the way up to the supercharged models, but at the $70,000 mark, this is actually pretty good value for a V8. Now, what about headlights? Given it is so old, this is one of the few cars on the market that still uses bi-xenon headlights with LED daytime running lights. You've got another set of fog lamps down there. And then if we jump around to the side, you've got a 20-inch set of alloy wheels. I really like this design. It's kind of like a graphite color and it's got a little bit of pearlescent in there as well. So they're pretty blingy looking wheels without being too over the top. So I like that design. Over here, you've got an indicator built into that wing mirror with a black gloss highlight along the top. Grand Cherokee badge down the side of the car. You've got roof rails, privacy glass, and then if you come around to the rear, the S signifies that it's the S Limited. You've got an LED portion there to those tail lights and a 3,500 kilogram brake towing capacity. Oh, and have a look at this. Real exhausts, something else you don't really see on too many cars today, and they're black as well, which I think looks cool. So we are inside the Grand Cherokee. Let's start with the key. This is what it looks like. You've got unlock, lock, boot, and then this. Now this is actually for remote starting, so you're able to remotely start the engine to run the cooling or the heating. Very cool feature, especially if you're down at the beach and it's a hot day or stuff like that. And then on the back you've got Jeep there. This is a proximity sensing key, so you just leave that in your pocket and grab the door handle, it unlocks the car. And then over here you have a stop start button as well. Now what about styling? So I mentioned earlier that this car has been out for absolute donkey's years, but it actually still looks pretty good, I reckon. So they've got this nicely styled dash. All of your critical controls are here in the center. Yes, there is piano black, but they haven't gone too overboard with it. And then it's broken up with this dark wood grain material. I don't think it's actually wood, but this wood grain-esque material along the dashboard. And then it follows around on the doors as well. So I still think this looks quite modern. I don't think it looks out of place or out of touch today. And I think when they do release the new model next year, it'll actually continue that trend of Jeep with styling, especially if the new Grand Wagoneer is anything to go by. By the way, if you want to see a video on the Grand Wagoneer, click up here. We'll give you a run through of it. Now, what about things like materials? So these materials are all really nice and soft, and that follows on to the touch points, such as that center armrest and then your door armrest as well. How soft are they though? Well, we have our durometer. We've tested all the main surfaces on this car. If you want to see how it compares to other cars that we've tested before, use the link in the description below. And then build quality, what about that? It's okay. I mean, that wobbles around a fair bit. But everything else feels okay. I'm actually keen to hear that there's a lot of I guess a lot of people complain about Jeep build quality, but I'm keen to hear from you owners. Do you own a Grand Cherokee or another Jeep product? Let us know in the comments section below whether you've had any dramas with it, and if so, how easy it was to get everything resolved. Okay, let's talk infotainment. So this is one of the highlights of the interior. It's called the Uconnect system. It's an 8.4-inch display, and we have a detailed review of Jeep's infotainment system. You can watch it by clicking up here. But today I'm just going to give you a brief run through of the infotainment plus the screen ahead of the driver. Now, the reason I say this is so good is just because of how easy it is to use and how fast it is. So you can see here, we've got our radio menu where you get AM, FM, DAB plus digital radio, all nicely laid out. And you watch here as we go through transition between menus, everything is just really nice and quick. There's no delay. It's just all nice and sharp. So in terms of smartphone mirroring, you have both Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. I'll show you what Android Auto looks like. So there it is there. It's almost a full screen integration, but they retain these shortcut controls so you can actually get between menus. That's really nice and quick as well, and super high resolution as well. Then I'll show you what Apple CarPlay looks like. Similar integration there. It takes up all of the available space and so high resolution. That is really cool. I like that. So all of this technology is over a cable. It's not wireless, which is a little bit disappointing, but some manufacturers are now moving to wireless CarPlay and Android Auto, which means you'll be able to ditch the cable and make life a little easier. In terms of the rest of the things you can do here, the controls menu is where you turn your heated seats and heated steering wheel on and off. You can activate the reverse camera. Then you've also got additional Uconnect apps that you can run through this system, such as off-road information, which we'll go through later. Ahead of the driver, you have a tachometer on the left, a fuel gauge and engine temperature on the right, but in the center is a digital display, and that digital display is full of information. So you have your trip computer, you have speed warnings, you also have configurable displays, so you can choose what appears there, messages, and also your safety systems as well, along with radio and four-wheel drive information. So I keep saying this, but this car is so old, but it has all of this new stuff here that kind of puts a band-aid over the age of the vehicle, and it makes you feel like you're driving something incredibly modern. In addition to all of this, you have a voice recognition system. The Uconnect native voice recognition is actually really quite good, but when you do have a smartphone paired, it sends commands through to your phone. So you get the best of both worlds there. You've got a 9-speaker sound system as well, and then in terms of connectivity, you have 2 USB ports, 1 auxiliary port, a 12-volt outlet up the front, and then another 12-volt outlet in the center console. Moving on to safety, you have autonomous emergency braking. You also have radar cruise control, a lane departure assistant, blind spot monitoring. So it is pretty well equipped in terms of safety tech. You have front and rear parking sensors, plus a semi-autonomous parking assistant. Now let's have a look at what the reverse view camera looks like. Look, it's pretty reasonable. It is a little bit grainy, but you get those guidelines, plus also a guideline for reversing a trailer in. So it's going to be very helpful if you do any towing. Okay, practicality. Let's start with storage and your phone. So your phone can easily live in the cup holders, but one curious thing I've noticed here, because this car is older, they obviously designed phone storage before these bigger phones were released, so it doesn't actually fit in down there. You've also got no wireless phone charging. In terms of coffee cups, so this is a test we're trying out in cars now. You'll notice here, this is a common issue I'm finding now, that some of these cup holders just are not designed for smaller coffee cups. So as you put the cup in, it grabs the edges and it kind of makes it hard while you're driving to grab it, because you might pull the lid off and then it goes everywhere. So just something to keep in mind. And then in terms of bottle storage, bottles easily fit in there. You've got some teeth as well to hold them in nice and tight. And then within the door, you've got bottle storage plus room for bits and pieces. Center console has 2 sections to it. So top section for coins and keys and things. And then another section down here where other things fit. It's actually quite deep. And then you've also got a glove box that easily fits a bottle. It's quite a decent sized glove box. And then finally, you have a sunglasses holder up the top. Okay, moving on to comfort, you have dual zone automatic climate control. You've got heated seats for the front row. You've also got a heated steering wheel. And then in terms of the seats themselves, being a Yank tank, the seats are actually really comfortable. So you can see here, they're quite supportive, especially for bigger people. And then they've got this perforated section down the bottom. The seats are also electrically adjustable for the driver, and front passenger, you get seat memory as well for the driver. Big steering wheel as well. You have electric steering adjustment as well. And then all of this is really easy to reach. The only thing I want to point out is you only really see this on older American cars, but there is a foot operated park brake here, which is, I don't know, let's just get rid of that and just have an electronic one. Okay, we're in the second row of the Grand Cherokee. Look, there's actually not a huge amount of room. I do have knee room here. Toe room's okay as well, and headroom's good. Just feels a little bit cramped. You look at the size of this vehicle from the outside and you think to yourself, there is heaps of room. But anyway, the good news is these seats move a little bit, so you can get a little more relaxed if you need to. So the back and the base as well. Then you have a center armrest with 2 cup holders. You can stick your bottles in there. They can also live in the door too. Now this is interesting. You've got air vents, which is great, But then you can also select whether you want them at that sort of level there or if you want them at the feet. So I haven't seen that before. And then 2 USB ports down the bottom. You've got these nets as well behind the seats, plus ISOFIX points on the 2 outboard seats. Okay, let's talk cargo space. So you have a power operated tailgate. Tiny bit slow, but that's okay. There it is there. So you have just under 800 litres of cargo space available. It's actually not that high. I'm sort of finding I have to duck down a little bit. So yeah, just under 800 litres of cargo space. You've got hooks down the side here along the sidewall. But the interesting thing is under the cargo floor, you have a full-size spare tyre with room on the sides as well. This isn't something you see all that often in vehicles this size. They normally stick it underneath or something like that. So that's really good to see. Let's see how our bags fit. I think this will fit without too many dramas. Yeah, easy. Now, the other good thing as well is that the second row folds flat. It doesn't happen from here though. You've got to go over there to do that. So I'll sort that out. And with the second row folded, you get just under 1,600 litres. All right, we are out driving the Grand Cherokee. Let's talk about the engine. So it is a 5.7 litre naturally aspirated HEMI V8. It produces 259 kilowatts of power and 520 newton meters of torque. Now it doesn't sound like a great deal, but remember this is naturally aspirated, so you're not going to get the big figures that you see with supercharged or turbocharged V8 engines. And it is mated to a really nice and sensible gearbox, an 8-speed automatic torque converter. So it is so nice and smooth as you get stuck into the throttle and just start resting into it. It just all responds nice and smoothly. And then when you do sort of want to give it a kick, makes such a good sound. I love the noise of a HEMI. It is a pretty old engine, but I think it still serves its purpose well, and it gives you all the thrills that you need from a naturally aspirated V8. And in terms of drive, it's a permanent all-wheel drive system, so you're constantly sending torque to all 4 wheels, and you never really feel like there's a lack of traction there, and we'll run through the 4-wheel drive controls shortly, but when you are driving on the road, it all just feels nice and planted. So the official fuel economy is 13 litres per 100 kilometres. But what are we sitting on? We're currently sitting on 15.4. That's about what I'd expect from a V8 in a vehicle this size. But keep in mind that I'm pretty sure when we tested the petrol V8, which is a bigger, meatier 4-wheel drive with also a naturally aspirated V8, it actually used less fuel. So it's interesting to see that this is sitting a little bit higher. We have been doing a mix of city and highway driving, and that figure is going to go up even higher if you are doing towing, especially if there's hilly terrain involved. Okay, let's talk about drive mode. So you've got an eco mode, which I don't think anyone's interested in, and then a sport mode. You hit that, you feel the gearbox dial back a few gears, you see sport mode come up, instantly it all feels much sharper. You hear that V8 singing as well. That's actually making a really nice sound. Let me give that another kick. I like that. In addition to that sport mode, you can manually shift gears using the paddles here on the steering wheel, or simply moving the lever across and going up and down through the gears. Now, what about 0 to 100? There is no official time, but let's see how it goes against our stopwatch. Okay, so moving on from that, because this doesn't have adaptive dampers, the ride is always the same. It doesn't even have air suspension. You get that on some of the higher grade models, but it's not such a bad thing. The ride is incredibly comfortable. It's tuned like an American car, so it is quite soft over continuous undulations. It just floats nicely, and it really is just built for these country roads, because whenever you hit a big rise like that falls in afterwards, it just really soaks it in nicely, and it just doesn't make you feel like there's no body control. It just feels really nice and planted. So we're out on a country road at the moment, and it's actually really quiet inside the cabin. I can't hear any wind noise coming in through those wing mirrors, and there's barely any tyre noise as well. So that's going to be something to keep in mind if you are doing long distance driving across Australia, that kind of thing, where some of the roads can be quite coarse chip. This just sucks them up nicely. Okay, what about handling? So yes, I know, not a sports car, but a little corner here. Let's see how it feels. Look, it's not terrible. Sits nice and flat, and that V8 engine just picks up nicely and slingshots it. So yeah, tick on the handling front. Now, what about visibility? Yes, it is a big old SUV, but I can clearly see out the front there. The window's quite big at the rear, so it's easy to see out the rear. The wing mirrors are massive as well with blind spot monitors, so you're never really left wanting for any more visibility. And then of course you have that semi-autonomous parking feature and front and rear parking sensors, so low speed drivability is pretty straightforward. In terms of turning circle, 12.2 meters. So it's not the world's tightest turning circle, but it does mean you should be able to get away with doing U-turns without a 3-point turn. Okay, let's talk off-road equipment, because Jeeps are known for being able to go off-road. So even here in the mid-spec, you actually still get a pretty comprehensive package of off-road equipment. So you can do some light off-roading, which we're going to do right now. So I'll run you through it all. You have a low-range transfer case, you have a hill descent control, and then also a selector here for different terrains, and that's going to modify the stability control and how it deals with sending traction to each side of the vehicle. In terms of the off-road specifications, you have 218 millimeters of ground clearance, 26-degree approach angle, so that's the angle of the face you can approach before you hit something, and then a 24-degree departure angle, which is the same except in reverse. And finally, you have a wading depth of just over 500 millimeters. Now, I wanted to also point out that here, there's actually on Uconnect an off-road package screen. And this is pretty cool because if you are driving off-road, this gives you a little bit more detail on what's happening beneath the car. So you can basically see things like your steering angle, what the transfer case is doing, how much pitch and roll you have, what the accessory gauges are up to, so the temperatures of your vehicle, and then also the terrain that you have selected. Now, it has absolutely bucketed down here overnight and it is incredibly muddy and stuff. So what I'm going to do is go into low range, which is achieved by going into neutral and hitting low range. I prefer to do this in petrol cars because it just gives you a little bit more control over descent speeds and a little less surging when you're going up things. Also, just in case any of this stuff doesn't make any sense or you do want a refresher, click up here to have a look at our four-wheel drive controls explained video. All right, let's give this a shot. We'll head up Log Mountain first. So all of the bits in between the logs are quite slippery here. So I'll be curious to see how it handles that. I'll pop that into mud mode as well. Okay, so we don't have air suspension, so we can't lift the car. It's actually coping with this really nicely, and it's incredibly comfortable in here as well. Yeah, I'm finding with the throttle, it's not surging or throwing me forward. It's really nicely controlled, and I feel like I'm in charge of what's going on. Okay, we'll head down the rocks here. It doesn't have the world's biggest ground clearance, so I think we're probably gonna have a little tap, but I'm gonna manually select first gear just so we can control our descent speed. There it is there, and we'll line it up over the rocks. Just a little tip here, if you ever are driving down rocks like this, it is worth checking your path first because you don't want to have a rock that comes up and gouges the car. Also going to kill the parking sensors as well so they don't annoy us. All right, we'll just have a really slow descent down here. If you could see this from where I am, it's actually quite steep. In fact, I'll tell you how steep it is. We're currently coming over to 14, 15 degrees. And because it's so muddy, everything's really loose. So as I use the brake pedal as we come down, it's sort of sliding a little bit. What we'll do as well, we're reaching 20 degrees there. I'm going to pop the hill descent control on for the remainder of this and we'll see how that works. You can use the paddle shifters to adjust the hill descent control speed here as well. So I'll go down to the slowest speed it can do. Okay, so I'm completely off the brake there. That's actually really good. This is probably one of the best hill descent controls we've had the chance to test, and I love the fact that I can control the speed entirely there with the paddles too. So there you go. That is actually really impressive for a stock SUV. You can go to other Jeep Grand Cherokee models if you want the more advanced four-wheel drive system with locking differentials and air suspension, but for the most part, this is going to do the job. Okay, Jeep Grand Cherokee. It's an oldie, but it's a goldie. It's just hard to fault. Like, yes, I know it's not the most advanced SUV in this segment, but I don't know, it really doesn't put a foot wrong. It does the off-road thing really well. It'll tow 3.5 tons, and okay, the V8 is probably not the most sensible option. You could go the diesel instead. I think that's still a really good engine, nice and smooth as well. But at the end of the day, it's still cheaper than a petrol. It'll tow the same as a petrol. And I think this is more comfortable as well than a petrol. So let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Would you buy a Grand Cherokee? I'm pretty excited to see what this next generation is like. As long as they keep all the core fundamentals that they've crammed into this into a brand new chassis, I think they'll really be onto a winner. So let me know what you think in the comments section below. Now, if you did enjoy this video, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and also press the bell icon because that's going to tell you every single time we drive another car with a black badge. But until next time, take it easy.